Hey everyone, it's Kate, and sewing with knits with a regular machine is easy with a few tips and tricks. In this video, I'm going to show you how to cut out knits, how to sew a stretchy stitch, and how to hem knits. Let's get started. When I'm cutting out knits, I do it in a single layer, meaning that I don't fold them. The edges of knits tend to curl, which makes it really hard to make sure that the fabric underneath is actually on grain. If my pattern has pattern pieces that are supposed to be cut on the fold, I trace them into double pattern pieces. Let me show you on the overhead. This is the pocket piece for the Cora leggings from Jolie, and this edge is supposed to be on the fold, but since I'm not folding my fabric, I take the pattern piece and trace half of it and flip it over and trace the other half to create a double pattern piece like this. And to make sure that it's on grain, I fold it and on the grain line, fold the pattern piece on the grain line and make sure that it lines up with the knit stitches on the fabric. If the fabric is too fine and I can't see the knit stitches, I'll just grab my cell phone camera and use the zoom function so that I can see the rows of stitches better and make sure that my pattern piece is on grain. So I've got this line that was supposed to be on the fold lined up with the grain line, and I will get ready for cutting it out. I usually use a combination of pins and pattern weights when I'm cutting out knits. The pattern weights kind of hold everything in place. And then I always cut out my knits with a rotary cutter because there's going to be less distortion than when you kind of lift with your scissors. And that's really important with knits. I'll move this out of the way. And on the straight edges, I use a ruler to help me. And then on the curves, I kind of just freeform it. And you'll notice that I stopped at the notch. With knits, I always go in after I've cut with my rotary cutter and cut out the notches with scissors. I do not like to cut my notches in on knits because frequently, like doing a little notch like that, frequently the seam allowance on a knit is only 1/4 inch, and it's really easy to snip all the way in, which I do not like. If a pattern piece is asymmetrical, this is the back crotch seam on the Cora leggings, and if a pattern piece is asymmetrical, I'll cut one with the pattern piece right side up and cut it again with the pattern piece upside down so that I'm not cutting two left legs. So after you've cut out your pattern pieces, it's time to sew. And to get my machine ready to sew with knits, I reduce the pressure on my presser foot. So I use various machines, and they all have different ways that you can reduce the pressure of your presser foot. It's really hard to say, but it's easy to do if you look at the manual on your machine and see how you do it with your machine. That allows the knit to really glide underneath the needle and not stretch while you're sewing it. I also experiment with 3 different needles. I try a universal needle, a stretch needle, and a ballpoint needle. Each of them have rounded tips, so the universal has a slightly rounded, stretch has a little more rounded, and ballpoint is even more rounded. And they allow the needle to go through the knit stitches without breaking them. And I never know which one's going to work best for a certain fabric, so I try all 3 to see which one makes the prettiest stitch. I also engage the dual feed mechanism if my machine has one, and if it doesn't, I grab a walking foot. I mean, your goal is just for the fabric to go through underneath the needle really smoothly. And when you're sewing with knits, you want a nice stretchy stitch. So I'm going to go to the overhead and show you my favorite stretchy stitch. So what I do is sew along the seam line with a very narrow zigzag. This one is 1.0 millimeters wide by 1.5 millimeters long. And then I sew next to that with what I call a regular zigzag, the one that my machine just naturally does. And that creates a strong but nice and stretchy seam. And it also looks good from the right side. So this stitch works for most knits for me, but I always experiment with different widths of zigzags to see what I like best on whatever fabric I'm using, because they're all just a little bit different. Hemming knits is challenging because, as I mentioned, the edges tend to curl, and of course knits stretch and shift, and it's sometimes hard to get a beautiful hem. So I like to get my edges under control before I hem them. And I have a 4-step process to do that. And let me show you on the overhead. I'm going to move the pressing surface into place. So the first thing I do is iron a piece of knit stay tape to the edge that I want to hem. Knit stay tape is super cool stuff. It's interfacing that stretches a little bit and has iron-on beads on one side. So I iron it on to the edge, and I should mention that all of the tools that I'm using in this video are going to be available by clicking a link below. So we have everything organized for you if you are interested in anything that I'm using. So I iron on the knit stay tape, and then this is double-sided fusible stay tape, which is really glue. It's glue with paper on one side. And I'm going to use a press cloth. I'm going to put oh, see, I already flipped it up. So I'm going to put the double-sided fusible stay tape right on the edge, and I'm going to put a press cloth over it and then iron it on. A lot of times the glue kind of migrates from the paper and you don't want to get it on your iron. And then before I remove the paper, I turn up my hem and press it in place. Make sure I like where it is. It's not with the stay tape, you can kind of feel the edge of it and make sure your hem is even. So after I've done the first press, I will remove the paper from the double-sided fusible stay tape and then press it one more time. And it is super securely on there, and you can check the right side to make sure your hem looks good. This stay tape will wash it out. You don't want to use it as a permanent sewing solution, but that's how I get my my hem in place and stable. And then I do one more step, which is hand basting from the wrong side. Obviously, I don't spend a lot of time on it. It's not perfect, but then from the right side, I've pretty much thread marked where I want to sew my hem. And then I just set my machine to the narrow zigzag that I selected before and sew right along the basting stitches, and I have a nice, stable, but slightly stretchy hem on my garment. So if you cut out your knits in a single layer, find a stretch stitch that you love, and use knit stay tape on your hem, you can make beautiful knit garments with your regular machine. A couple weeks ago, I made a video making these Cora leggings. These are the bike shorts from Jolie, and I invite you to watch that video and challenge yourself to make yourself a pair because they're really fun and I show you all the tricky bits. So thanks everyone for watching, and bye for now.